Thank you. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Good evening, everyone. Karen, can you call the roll?
Sure. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines, Lori Connolly, Liz Dillon, Jay Fundling, Allison Gagnon on Zoom, Andrew Coe is here, Peter Mott on Zoom, Brian McGuire is here, and on Zoom we have Aman Nagasi and Judy Steele. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here this evening, coming off of the special town meeting. For those of you who haven't been to the town meeting before, I hope you enjoyed yourself. It was quite the busy one. But and I also wanted to mention to Warrant Committee, for those of you who worked on the comments and assisted, I can't speak to my predecessor, but I was approached by several different people who thanked us for the work on the comments and how technical they were and the information they provided. So that made me feel really good. So I want to thank everybody here for adding to the comments and discussion, actually drafting them and then submitting them. So thank you very much. So tonight we have Town Administrator Nick Milano, and going to outline some things for us and what we're going to be doing as a committee. So we're going to talk a little bit about the annual town meeting, timing, expectations, and then the fiscal year 26 budget. I know Nick can probably expand on this, but the select board is meeting this week, and I believe we'll be suggesting a number for the override. And at that point, the school committee will then make a recommendation on their budget. So one committee, there are a lot of meetings going on this week. I caught some school committee meetings last week, so try to avail yourself of Milton Cable Access. Just just watch what's going on with the other boards. Planning board, I know, is going to be busy also. That's really it. That's really all I have. We have some time for some discussion later on after Nick presents, and I think it will probably position us going forward. We should be talking about our future scheduling as a committee. It's going to ramp up pretty quick. The warrant closes sooner than we think. So that's all. So Nick, would you like to come up? Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Do you know what day the select board is meeting? I don't see them on the calendar.
It's on the 11th.
Yeah. The 11th, so a week from tomorrow.
Not this week,
okay.
Next week. I'm sorry, I misspoke. To those watching the tape delay at home. Thank you, Jay. But I know the school committee clearly indicated that, they're obviously waiting on the select board. School committee's kind of tossed around a couple of different percentage increase. But we can talk about that at a later time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me. Good to see everybody.
Thanks.
Of course. And just to echo Tom's comments, I think the way the town meeting was able to move through the articles, some of them which were technical and complicated, without a lot of questions as to what the articles meant or how they would work, I think was indicative of the comments and the effort that went into those. So made our lives easier, so I appreciate your work. I know a lot goes into it, a lot of hours, a lot of homework, and everything else, so we sincerely appreciate the work that this committee does, so thank you. Wish there was a little bit more breathing room in between the two town meetings that we have in this cycle. But there's not much. So I'll just chat quickly about the warrant articles, then I can dive into the budget stuff. So as part of the annual town meeting warrant, there are a number of articles. I think the last count is like 37 that are part of our annual kind of batch of articles. They're all primarily budgetary or financial related. They all comprise the operating budget and or the capital budget. So there's like this baseline of articles that appear annually recurring at the annual town meeting. So those will go to town meeting. Additional articles for inclusion, there haven't been a lot that have been discussed to this point. Obviously, as you know from town meeting, several were referred back. I think those boards are interested in looking at ways to send those back to town meeting for May, although the short turnaround between now and actually the warrant going to the printer at the in the beginning of April makes it tricky to potentially with just procedural, get articles drafted, redrafted, and back to the warrant committee. So of those that were referred back, site plan approval and accessory dwelling units, the planning board is actually meeting right now. My understanding is they anticipate resubmitting those at their meeting tonight. It's on their agenda, so those potentially will be back for the warrant committee. And you will have seen, from my understanding, basically all those potential changes, whether on town meeting floor or at prior meetings. There's one zoning bylaws amendment that is more of another housekeeping nature. The flood maps have all been updated for the floodplain. So our zoning bylaws refers to flood maps as of a date, so that just needs a technical correction to reflect the newest and latest versions of those. So more of a housekeeping, similar to the zoning map one we just went through. The other zoning bylaw amendment that we've been notified about is the East Milton Overlay District. That is something that the planning board's been working on for several years. They do have a public meeting on that next Tuesday, March 11th at 7 o'clock at the Milton Arts Center. There is a Zoom link available for that as well. So the intention is to try to record that. But there's been previous engagement on this. And if it's not something you've spoken to the planning board about, I imagine after that meeting, they'll be ready to do so. The other two were the dark sky and light trespass. The select board hasn't met to take those up yet, so no news on those, although there was some discussion about trying to turn them around. And then the one about alcohol on town property, again, potentially looking at that to respond to some concerns raised at town meeting. Outside of those, I'll flag two for potential discussion at the select board next week. They might not go anywhere. If they do that night, obviously I'll let you know, but they might not. We've been looking at the East Milton Fire Station in terms of what's going to happen with that property next. And there's really two ways to approach it. Town meeting needs to authorize the select board to dispose of that property. So select board could request town meeting to do so now, or select board could put out an RFP, figure out what it's going to do with the property, and then return to town meeting after the fact and request authorization. So we're going to talk about which process the board would like to follow. Either way, there's a town meeting vote involved and a select board vote in process. And with the East Milton Fire Station construction starting this spring, the new station opening potentially 15 months from now, time frame approximately, 15 to 18 months from now, where there are some decisions to be made about the former East Milton, well, what will soon be the former East Milton Fire Station. And then there is a intersection project at Adams Street and Squantum Street that has been in design for a number of years. It's on the transportation improvement plan for the state, so the state would fund the construction once the design is finished. So the town has been funding the design. There's been public engagement meetings around that. There are some land takings, both permanent and temporary, that would need to be authorized by town meeting. And we did something similar for the East Milton deck project probably in like 2015, 2016, where there were temporary takings that the town needed to be authorized to do to enable the construction to happen. And then there are some permanent takings that remained permanent. So similar there, and we'll provide more information. The select board, as Tom noted, is meeting next Tuesday, and we'll finalize its list of warrant articles that evening. But that is all that's been on my radar and submitted to us. So I don't anticipate much more. I've said that before, so I will hopefully leave it at that. But that's kind of annual town meeting. Warrant should be complete by about 30 days from now and being sent to the printer for delivery that evening, or that week, excuse me.
Nick, I just wanted to mention, and I mentioned it prior to the meeting, and I know I had a conversation with you at some point, just the historical
Yes.
up on Milton Hill. I know that they're meeting with, Historical Commission's meeting with MPIC, I think, to discuss that.
Okay.
So it looks like, I think they're probably gonna.
Yep, that's the local historic district bylaw that went to town meeting last year and was referred back, and there haven't been any final steps taken on that proposal.
Does anybody have any questions for Nick, just about the upcoming annual meeting and, just what it comprises, what we're looking at? Liz, then Brian?
I have at least 3 questions. One is for the intersection of Adams and Squantum and the takings, are those private property, public property?
Yes, it's all private. Yeah, we wouldn't have to take our own property. It's all private land. Most of them are a few hundred square feet here and there. There's a couple of larger ones closer, if you're coming on Squantum toward Adams, turn right on Adams. The 3 properties, I think it's the first 3 on the right-hand side as you make that turn, are the 3 more directly affected potentially for permanent takings. And those have been discussed about before. And it's yards and walls, so land would be taken, walls would be deconstructed and reconstructed as part of the project.
And you have to pay the people for that? Okay. Do you know about how much that would run?
There's a 2, I think it's a 2 appraisal process, if I remember right.
So we don't really know at this point?
Correct.
Okay. And then, does the select board have any idea if they were to put in an RFP for the fire station? Do they have any idea what kinds of things they're looking at putting there?
No, and that's where, so some of the discussion, we've already had some discussion about that. We put out an expression of interest to try to stir up some interest in the property and get some feedback. Potential parties who might be interested were reluctant to put pen to paper on anything because it was like an informal process, and they had indicated they would be interested in applying in a more formal RFP process, but didn't want to put ideas out there in too much of concrete. So we got some interest, but nothing really firm to report back other than potential redevelopment interest in the property generally. It's a tight site. It's kind of a funky site. It's not, it's obviously right there on the corner, so it's important to the square, but it's a tricky piece of property.
Yes, it's very triangular.
Yeah, exactly.
And then for the alcohol and town property, sort of what are those discussions, if you can tell us, kind of going on about that? Because I think we approved of the amended article, but I understand there's still some discussions going on. Can you tell us about that?
No, only that obviously the select board was interested in having the authorization be on town land as well. So reaching out to folks who spoke up to try to see if there's any interest in coming back with a further revision and go from there. But the bylaw itself, as amended, was approved.
Yeah.
So that's going through.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Right? And then Lori.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is something you can answer, but maybe it's an amendment, but like, one of the things that, at the town meeting that drove me crazy was like major last minute amendments. And I'm not talking about like friendly amendments or a few word changes in the meeting, but like major things that there was like no notice on, and the warrant committee never got to discuss. Is there a way that you can put it in like a week before? You have to have everything in at least a week before the meeting, and then you get a chance to, and we just schedule a meeting Wednesday before the town meeting or something and discuss all the last minute stuff. That's what I would recommend.
Sure.
But that
So-
would be a bylaw though, right?
There's no hard and fast rule, and I don't know that you could really require any kind of amendments be submitted only in writing beforehand. I think the moderator requests of the members that they submit more complex amendments that would require more detailed review in writing the Friday before the meeting if possible. Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. But at the same time, the submitting authorities are always also able to offer their own amendments to articles they've submitted. So that's where, some of those came from the planning board. One obviously came from the select board as well. So we try to avoid that where we can. I think we were in a more unique situation than usual with the site plan and accessory dwelling units, where we were down to the wire on getting feedback and guidance from the state on those. So in a normal town meeting that was a bit of an outlier. So, it's not our practice, and we'd want to try to avoid that where possible.
But that I get, the ADU, because I understand that one. But maybe, but there was other significant ones, even with the boards.
Yep.
Some of the boards, and like nobody had a chance to look at, review, study, analyze.
And I think you saw that effect from the members too,
Yeah.
where they were unsuccessful because of that. So I think that's a lesson learned for everybody too.
Just, I don't know, my thought would be they should throw something, well, not all of them were unsuccessful. The
Right,
first
some,
one was.
yeah.
So maybe a thought would be, would that have to be a bylaw, or would that be?
Well, I think the issue at the end of the day is, anyone can stand up on the floor and offer to amend, any town meeting member. So I mean,
Yeah,
that
I get
obviously-
friendly amendments, but
Friendly and-
complicated ones.
That case, but just from my perspective anyway, and there are other town meeting members here on the board, but this is something we've seen in the past, not frequently, but especially on the site plan and ADU. I mean, you have a lot of people who are very interested and knowledgeable about that type of topic, and they want to obviously give some help. Sometimes it slows things down tremendously, but I don't know if there's really any way to control, unless it would be I mean, but then again, I don't know how that would work in terms of the due process that town meeting affords in the system that we're part of. So, anyone else? Any town meeting members here want to chime in? Experiences? No? Okay. Lori?
Has there been any consideration on the current East Milton Fire Station to keep the bill?
That has been a topic of conversation. It's why it hasn't, not why, but one of the reasons there was some maybe initial reluctance to put out an RFP was, why don't we see what some interest is or isn't in the property? So that was where we dialed it back and went with the expression of interest process. DCR was doing it with 7 Brush Hill Road, so we kind of just copied their process to try to do something similar. It didn't quite work as much as we had hoped it would. But yes, keeping the building, disposing of the property, but requiring a subsequent owner to maintain the building or keep the building, those are all items for discussion, and I don't want to put the cart too far before the horse, because the select board hasn't really talked about it, but it's something that I'm going to bring to them in terms of just taking a step back and thinking about process. When would you like to ask for town meeting authorization to take the next step? It could be, a year from now after an RFP, or it could be now, and then the select board goes to the RFP process after that.
Can I follow up on that? I mean, are you talking about like leasing it and renting it out to something like?
I'm saying, let's just not sell it. I mean, we don't need to make a decision in 6 months. I mean, like, we could sit there for a year as long as somebody's, checking on it. We don't need to make a rash decision like we have.
No, that was certainly a part of the conversation as well. So more to come on it for sure.
I would just thinking about that, like just having and somebody should do an analysis as to, if you did lease it out, to have a shop in there or something.
That was included in the expression of interest, and there wasn't any immediate interest in something like that.
Yeah.
Liz?
I just wanted to say that this is more of me just expressing my thanks to the planning board for having that East Milton overlay discussion. I've been to several of them, and I thought it was very open and helpful to have that kind of feedback. So I look forward to going to the one on the 11th, and as an East Milton person, I think that's very helpful. So I'm glad that they're doing that, and I'm looking forward to seeing that article.
Sure.
That wasn't a question, that was just me saying something.
I know
but
a lot
I do feel that way. I think it's great.
Time and energy have gone into it, that's for sure.
Thank you.
They've had like 4 meetings about it already. This is like the 5th one, so that's great.
Absolutely.
Any other questions just about the annual in general?
It's on the first Tuesday in May 1st, whatever that first Tuesday is.
Monday.
Monday. I think it's like May 1st, 4th,
May
5th, 5th, okay.
So that's
Thank
when
you.
it all, when the magic's gonna happen. So no other just general questions of the annual? For those of you who haven't been to see an annual, it is a little bit different than the special. Check out an older one. online, just kind of get an idea of some of those 37 articles. Look in the older warrants will be helpful, just in terms of the budgetary items that we have to address. But if there are no other questions, I guess maybe move on just to the fiscal year 26 budget, Nick, and I guess
Sure.
expectations and everything else.
All right, so I don't have a ton here, but it'll help add some context. So, fiscal 26 budget. This is just a high-level overview of where things stand presently. I'm sure everybody's heard of the debate over what to do with an override and how much. The reason we're having that conversation is if you lump our revenue forecast against our expenditure forecast, we're looking at a deficit as of right now of about $9.5 million, slightly under $9.5 million. So this rolls everything in just at a high-level summary. And in terms of revenue more specifically, we've had some conversations about our revenue forecast. Not a lot has changed. We did upwardly revise our new growth forecast from $850,000 to $1 million, so that's a $150,000 increase. Our new growth trend is still strong. We've been over 1.2 million the last couple of years. And that's additions, renovations, new construction. Several of the 40Bs have started construction, so this year and thereafter, starting in fiscal 26, we'll really start to see those show up in new growth. We have no change in our local receipts forecast. We've talked about those in more detail at prior meetings. It's interest income, trash fees, motor vehicle excise, those additional fees that you pay to the town. State aid is the big revenue category that we are still very much keeping as a forecast. The governor's budget came out in January. There was a little increase year over year in state aid for Milton. What there was largely offset by increases in state assessments. So our net increase in state aid from fiscal 25 to fiscal 26 per the governor's proposal is about $73,000. In our forecast, we were slightly less optimistic in aid and assessments, but there wasn't much change in our forecast because we had already been pretty close to where things expected to come from. But that's state aid in a nutshell.
And how much did our MBTA assessment?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look at it. It goes up pretty consistently year over year. The main increase in teachers and main increase in assessments was in teachers' retirement charge for when you retire as a teacher, you go into a state insurance program. So there's a cherry sheet assessment for that, and that went up 12%. So just the outlook, and just to kind of reiterate what that level service budget looks like, is revenue is about $137 million. That includes free cash for capital, town and school capital. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee met last week and made its recommendation on general fund capital budget for fiscal 26. There is some set aside in free cash for funds that can only be used for opioid settlement purposes. So that is anticipated to be appropriated accordingly. And then $500,000 in free cash for general stabilization. So those are the current planned uses of free cash in this budget. And that's against expenditures, again, just kind of recapturing the summary from prior. So that $9.5 million override is necessary to balance the budget. And just to dive a little bit deeper on health insurance, this is a extremely large increase year over year for several different reasons. So Milton is self-insured for health insurance. We carry a balance in the health insurance trust, which we use to pay claims. So everybody that the town and employees pay into a trust pays the claims. We like to keep that trust at a healthy level without being too high. So while trend increases in medical claims and medical costs affects our premiums, another factor is the town's balance in its trust. Last year, we were carrying a very significant trust, and in fiscal 25 had a planned use of that trust to provide a premium holiday to employees into the town of one pay period. Just again, to keep that trust from getting too high, and we certainly don't want to get it too low. So in fiscal '25, the health insurance budget include use of one-time funds, federal funds, which ARPA federal funds, and a premium holiday. So those two were one-time uses of monies that needed to be filled back in fiscal '26 before we did anything else. So that's one factor that caused the increase. The fiscal '25 budget was based on lower enrollment than we're seeing now. From about April, May time period to October, November, we had a significant increase in enrollment in the plan. And looking at the churn, it's not any one particular department that you can say. It's a number of factors. We've even had a couple of employees come out of the town's opt-out program and onto the plan. So we will pay employees to opt out of our insurance plan. If you've been on the plan for 2 years, you're eligible to do so. And so right now it's a $2,500 for an individual or a $5,000 payment for a family plan to opt out of our plan and go on a spouse or partner's plan. So we're seeing people come off of the opt-out back onto our plan. A number of folks go from individual to family. So all this churn and enrollment means we have more people enrolled around now than we did in the last probably 9 months. So the other increase we had to make was increase our counts and enrollment to properly account for everybody that's on the plan now. Thirdly, significant premium increase right now for about 14% is the recommendation from our consultant to maintain that trust at a level that will be not too high, not too low. But again, we're projected to go upwards of $17 million in claims this year. And in fiscal '24, as a counterpoint, we had $13.7 million in claims. So we're talking, a 25% increase year over year in claims. I mentioned that we're self-insured, and I don't want to get too deep into healthcare weeds, but we buy stop-loss insurance. So if there's a high claim, we pay $175,000 of that claim, and then the stop-loss insurer covers the rest of that. So there is some protection built in against, the one-off outlier claims. What we're seeing is a general trend increase across the board. And this is a trend that cities and towns across Massachusetts are facing. The GIC, which is a lot of state employees and a lot of municipal employees, is going up 12.2%, I believe. Maya, which is our insurance provider for our general insurance, workers' comp, property liability, and so on. They have a health insurance program, and that's a range between 9 and 19%, depending on the community. So we are not alone. We're lucky in a way that the trust was in the position that it's in. But that premium increase, if we were to go with the recommendation, that's a $1,000 increase for an employee on a family plan. So we don't take that lightly. It's a significant cost for the town as well. I'm on the plan, so I'll be paying that increase, whatever we land at. So it's, we're all feeling it, unfortunately, and Milton's not alone in that case. And then lastly, we do have Medicare plans for folks once they age into Medicare, and those we have budgeted a 10% increase, but those are our January to January plans, so it's not a full year increase. We saw about a similar increase in the current year for those. So a little bit of a deeper dive on health insurance, but we can talk about that at a separate meeting if folks would like to. But I just wanted to flag it because, town departments went up, school department went up, but the shared costs for the town, primarily health insurance, are a big factor why the override projected number is where it is. So I wanted to give it a little bit special attention. And I'm happy to pause there for questions.
I have a couple, but do you have it broken down by department?
In terms of?
The increase, the health insurance, are they all up the same amount?
So it's one plan townwide.
Yes, but do you have?
In terms of the enrollment?
Police, DPW, fire, school?
We could provide it if you're curious to see. In terms of, we could provide the number of employees rather than the names of some employees on the plans.
You wouldn't have the dollars, though?
We would, yeah.
Oh, you would? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'd be curious at that.
Okay.
And did you ever think about the whole, do you think there's an issue where people might be opting out of, one of the spouses might be opting out of their company plan, getting paid, because some companies will pay them a bonus in going onto the town's plan. Do you think that might be an issue?
In terms of it's more advantageous for them to take that payment and opt into ours, potentially. We did a survey of other cities and towns, and there's one other town that's offering, I think it's $3,000 for an individual, $8,000 for a family. Otherwise, we didn't find a town that's higher than ours. So I think ours is pretty competitive on that side of things, but could private employers be offering the same? I'm sure it's possible. I only mention it because it's a little unusual to see them coming back. But I wouldn't say it's a huge trend. It's one of the factors in one of the
Some companies
enrollment
offer money, so if you can get, it's like, it could be beneficial for somebody to go from
Yep.
single to family, and then they get, one of the spouses, and then
Right.
they get off the company's plan.
Yep.
But a thought would be, if you're negotiating union contracts, that would be a negotiating point.
Yeah, the opt-out as it currently is designed is per an agreement when the last time the town did plan design changes, which was in for calendar year 20. And the other thing, and it's a little bit more in the weeds, is we want people who aren't using the plans to be enrolled, because then they're paying the premiums without costing us money. So there's that balance too in terms of who is opting out, who isn't, and wanting to ensure that the trust gets the benefit of that too.
So we're clear. And I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear, but like, you don't want somebody's spouse opting out of their company's plan and getting money for that and going under the town's plan, like preventing that. That's what I'm talking about.
We couldn't really prevent. How would we
You
prevent
could
it?
if you negotiated in union contracts, if it's a union thing.
If during open enrollment they'd be allowed to come onto the plan regardless of what else is going on. It's outside of an open enrollment, they wouldn't be able to join the plan unless they have a qualifying event. And opting out of coverage wouldn't qualify. You'd have to have lost your coverage for a reason.
We could talk.
Okay.
maybe after.
Yeah, no,
I have a question.
sure.
So, I just want to make sure I understand this. So, people pay their premiums, it goes into the trust, and then that trust money can only be used to pay out claims.
Right.
So, and it was advised, this premium holiday, I find that interesting. So, when it was advised to have the premium holiday, that's because you said it was kind of, that trust balance was getting sort of high.
Right.
So we want it to be kind of within a range, not too high, not too
Correct.
low. Okay. And that money can't be used for anything other than health insurance related?
That's right.
Okay.
And the advisors strongly recommend that if the trust is in good shape, their recommendation is don't buy down your premium increase. Don't go from a 10% to a 2%.
Right.
Do a holiday instead,
Yeah.
because that way, the rates are still going up. People are still getting used to the new prices, and maybe it prevents a little whiplash year to year from a big year to a small year. So their recommendation is if you're in position to have a good trust, keep up with kind of standard premium increases, but pay it back with a holiday during the year.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Andrew?
I had a couple of questions. First, you'd mentioned you offer Medicare plans. So is that supplemental plans?
Supplemental plans,
Okay.
yeah.
And why does the town offer supplemental plans as opposed to having people go to market?
It's a benefit of being a employee who retires through the town of Milton. If you retire, you're allowed to stay on the plans
Okay.
at the employee rate until you reach Medicare age. And at which point you're required to then transition.
Right? And who's the premium advisor that we currently use?
It's Cook and Company.
Cook and Company. Okay. Do we ever put that out to our RFP? Or
Their contract is up after this fiscal year, and it was put out in, I think, 22. So prior to the spring of 22, I believe was the last
three-year
time. it went
contracts
out. Yep.
typically? Okay. And then the last question was Brian J. shared the healthcare PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I didn't actually see what were the actual premium rates.
Sure.
And obviously, we know what percentage the rates are changing, but we have no sense of, well, based on the information we receive, I have no sense of what it looks like relative to what private pay,
Yeah,
sponsored actual premium overall
Yes.
out-of-pocket expenditures.
no, I can just real quick
Deductibles?
pull that up. So we offer their deductible plans, $400 individual, $800 for a family plan. The town pays 76% of the premium, and the employees pay 24%. We do offer a PPO plan, which is split 50-50 between the employers, the town, and the employees. That's one of our least subscribed plan. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the exact split right now.
And for a family, what does that look like roughly, premium-wise, monthly basis?
I don't want to misspeak, so I'm just pulling it up. Give me one moment. So the total cost of the Blue Cross HMO plan is about did that wrong. Sorry. Hold on. So for the town on the monthly basis, it is, sorry, that's this year's. That's why the math isn't added. Total cost right now is $30,000, $30,714 for the plan for a year. The town pays 76%, employee pays 24%. So on a monthly basis, the town is paying for a family plan just shy of $2,000, $1,945. An employee is paying $567. And the Tufts plan, or the Harvard Pilgrim plan, is very similar. They're off by maybe $20 on an annual basis.
Now I'm a little confused. The town is self-insured, though.
Correct.
So, but we offer Tufts and Harvard Pilgrim plan?
We offer Blue Cross and Harvard Pilgrim. We're self-insured for the claims experience.
Got it. So it's a pretty generous plan.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And we aren't too much of an outlier in terms of comparing ourselves to other cities and towns. We're the GIC level. The town has the authority to make plan design changes that bring it to a GIC level type plan. So the GIC, again, is for the state employees and for certain cities and towns that have opted into the GIC. So that's something the town could do. We haven't negotiated plan design changes since they went into effect January 1 of 20. So we've been at the same plan level, and that was when the deductible was introduced at the first time. The premium increases have been decent since then. They dropped a little bit in the first fiscal year following the plan design changes, and then in the years since then, so 22 through 25, they went up 5%, then 3.5%, then they were flat, 0%, and then 3% last year. So the premium increase has been manageable for the last several years.
Yeah, commensurate to, I guess, last comment, and we'll dig into it. I'd love to see the actual premium rate schedule.
Sure.
But 3% is pretty low relative to what's going on in the actual marketplace. I mean, companies are seeing like 10 to 15% premiums increases year over year.
And that's obviously where we're landing now. And we had been in decent shape prior to this.
Okay.
Oh, Jay.
Just if I could raise a couple questions about how it's presented in the warrant, and I think we've talked about this before. One issue is we have a line item in the warrant for employee benefits, which is healthcare and pension, I think and then we have a whole other line item in the warrant for contributions to the retiree medical trust, the OPEB trust. I would love it if we could put the contribution to the OPEB trust in the employee benefits article. I think we've mentioned that before. I just wanted to remind you.
Yes, I have 2 separate articles on my list, but I have a note on the OPEB one to move it up. So hopefully I will remember, but remind me if I don't.
And another request, which you might be less happy about, but I would love to see one line, instead of one line for healthcare, one line for active healthcare and one line for retiree health benefits. That way someone could look at the warrant or the town budget or something and see, this number went into the OPEB trust, this number went to retiree claims this year, you add them together, that's what we paid for retiree medical. I understand a downside of that is once you give a number to a line item, you're stuck with that number and that line item. I'd at least ask you and Ms. Dexter to seriously consider that. And if you have objections, then you have objections, but I think that would be a plus. With, 5-10 years from now, you smush those together, you just put a lump sum into the OPEB trust every year, you pay the retiree benefits out of that every year, but that's years down the line.
Sure. Okay. Good. All right.
Thank you.
Sorry for the exciting health insurance conversation,
Well,
but it's important.
We're very interested in health insurance here.
It's a huge part of our budget this year, and as it is every year. And so just in terms of sustainability, and this isn't super in order, but I added this slide just to talk about if the override were to be successful, or even in a case where it's unsuccessful, how do we manage year to year? And I think it's important to be upfront that there's no silver bullet that's going to solve the town's financial condition and its structural deficit year over year. I think in future years, budgets, especially if an override is approved, budget's going to have to be minimal increases year over year. That $9.5 million funds the budget, but it doesn't include some extra amount of money for use in future years. And while that might be something that would be desirable, that just brings that pushes that override number north of $10.5 million. My recommendation, what we've been looking at, is taking our surplus free cash after we make the appropriations for capital, for the opioid settlement purposes, and into general stabilization for our reserves, is that we take the rest of it and set it aside to an operating budget stabilization fund to be used over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. Now, that's not a magic answer, it's not a perfect answer, but I think it will help go a long way to helping the budget be successful in future years at affording those minimal increases. I don't think we're in a place where we're going to be talking about very much in needs, except for really crucial requests over the next 3 to 5 years. The pressure points on the budget, we've talked a bit about the collective bargaining agreements, town and schools, they all are up June 30th. And that's, a lot of what we have as people. And so it can be tricky to balance those in with the budget. Debt service in 26 and 27 is not going up by a hugely significant amount. That means it will start going up in 28 and 29, just the way that some of our projects are lining up and where we anticipate to issue debt for those projects. We expect more of a pressure point in the outer years rather than immediately in fiscal 27. And then lastly is health insurance. Every 1% is somewhere between $125,000 and $150,000 in costs. So, 14% premium increase puts a lot of costs in the town budget. A 3% premium increase could mean a significant savings. So those are not the only pressure points, but I want to flag those in particular. And then the other option for the town is to continue to potentially seek out economic development opportunities, new growth opportunities. We're seeing new growth come on and be significantly higher than it's been. We were historically anywhere between $800,000 and $900,000. The last several years, we've been north of 1.2 million, and that's permanent new taxable tax revenue that is coming into the town. So I don't have a solution. I'm just mentioning a few of the tools that we can implement. after this year to try to, through this budget year, but also as we come into in future years, to try to sustain this budget for several years with the school project potentially coming down the line. There won't be appetite for an operating override in the near term. So I think we're going into that well aware, but I just wanted to point that out, especially the anticipated use of free cash that we'll be recommending as part of the annual town meeting.
Nick, Allison is online.
Sure.
She just had a quick question.
Okay.
Allison?
Hi, yeah, so, I've been a part of this for a couple of years, and I'm just kind of curious, we knew we were in a deficit last year. We didn't go for an override because some magical way we got to a balanced budget. And we were using free cash, and we're doing it again, and it's almost like we're not learning our lesson. Can you explain further why? When before this, years ago, we didn't use free cash like this to balance budgets and hire people in positions. So I'm just curious why we're doing this again next year. Thank you.
Sure. So I would draw a distinction between using free cash that is certified immediately in the following budget year without a plan or a strategy. And in this case, where my recommendation would be to purposefully set this aside to support the budget for some future years, not to use whatever free cash is certified at the end of next fiscal year to throw it into that budget year, but to use planned withdrawals carefully and cautiously, and with the intention of doing so. So putting some intention behind it to have some opportunity to support the budget in future years. So that's the line of thinking, and it's not to just continue to use free cash to balance the budget year over year and call it a day.
I just like to follow too. So, my whole thing is that, we continue to add without really kind of properly vetting some of these things that we're doing. Is there any process that you have for each group that you manage for this budget, that kind of comes back to you and like you work to this budget so that you somewhat live amongst the income more so than, and I see it more in the school side, and I, advocate for going through and kind of weeding out things that necessarily might not be working so that we can, because, somebody who's managed budgets and marketing, you look at proven success and you alter it. So I'm just curious if there's any sort of process amongst all of this that you put together with these committees and groups that you manage.
Sure. For fiscal 26, there's nothing that's been added in the town departmental side. There's been a cost accounted for inflation in terms of, it doesn't cost the same amount of money to repair a DPW truck as it did 2 years ago. So we have adjusted our general expenses to accommodate that. But otherwise, the town departmental budgets are salaries and wage increases and modest increases in certain general expense lines accordingly. And across the town departments, we're at around a 4.5% year-over-year increase. So I feel like they have, adjusted where needed without significantly adding or expanding their budgets.
But as we see the school side, we're at a 9% increase and again next year. So I'm just curious how you're managing that, with the committees.
That is a discussion that is ongoing with the school committee and the superintendent,
Sure.
and they control their budget and submit their
Okay.
request. So, encourage you to follow up with
Yeah,
them.
no, I just didn't know if that was something that they come to, we all work together, and if you've had any of, besides them, any of the groups, come back and manage kind of their budget a little bit more of a tightening and saying, okay, we've cut here, we realized we didn't need this position, whether it's on, the police side, the fire, we need them all, but I understand that some of them aren't data driven, or they're, maybe it's administrative and they realize that they're not collecting this, anymore, or whatever it may be. So I'm just curious how we tighten up a little bit on some of these budgets, seeing how we have such a high ask for an override.
And I know this committee will be meeting with the schools as well and take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Nick, could I just follow up? This is kind of like a bird's eye view question, and I'm just basing it on some other communities that have done overrides. When you say kind of lock in the budget for the next few years, like at 3%, and that's all departments, would that include the schools? Or is
Right now, that's my suggested in terms of guidance, where I would expect us, if to make it last, that's where we would need to be.
And I know I've seen like Higham, for example, like they've kind of like set out this, everyone can only ask for a percentage increase. I think they had boards and committees like sign these promises or whatever you want to call them. Is that something that we would look to do? Would that be like a public pronouncement that we would only be looking to raise it, or? And I'm just curious because I know that I think Higham has a deficit now. They just did an override, and so I'm just thinking like, how do you stop that? Not like so strike that all about public pronouncement, but like how would you as the administrator, if you can? This is kind of a crazy question that's morphed into, but how do you kind of lock them in like that?
I know,
yeah,
if
right,
if you know the answer, then I'm sure there are many town administrators in Massachusetts who would want to know. But I think it's part of the whole process. I think for this year, we tried to kick this budget conversation off. I did my first forecast, the select board in July. So I think it was about reminding folks where the budget is. And I think this year was a little bit of an outlier because the expectation was we had gotten to where we could get to the last several years, but this was the year where the override, we would stop talking about it and actually have to do it. But I think coming off of one and setting expectations now that, look, if this gets approved, we will have gone to the taxpayers, made a significant ask for good reason, but now that it's approved, there's a certain amount of revenue that we have every year, and that's it. And there's not many alternatives to that, and it's just kind of the game plan in terms of being very clear from the get-go that there isn't a magic box of money that we can tap into because a department wants a 5.5% increase or needs a 5.5% increase. It's not going to be something that the town would be able to afford in the immediate wake of an override. And there are certainly pressures around special education, around health insurance, like we're talking, that it's out of our control to an extent. So we have to do the best we can, but I wish I had a perfect answer for you. I think it's a little bit of everything in terms of setting some money aside, maybe maybe economic growth will help out, maybe some good news on some of the pressure points that we're talking about and will help mitigate some of that initially. But it's a tricky conversation to have for sure.
Yeah, and I know that health, and I know that I just from seeing the school increases over the last several years, we were at like 8, 9, how and I know SPED is totally out of our hands. I mean, we can't really, but I'm just
no, I think it's about
spitballing in my head.
Setting expectations that, in 25, for example, we had the last of the federal funding that we had to use by December of 2024. We had to put it to use. We had a good amount of free cash, and we had the retirement system reach full funding, which released $2.5 million into the operating budget. So was that the right year to go for an override when we have additional money coming into the budget, when we have federal funds that we have to spend down, when we had free cash that was available to be used? And the analysis at that time was no. It meant a harder conversation today, but it was discussed for sure.
Steve, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Nick. So maybe an observation, maybe a suggestion on your deck. I think for additional pressure points, I would add in there some of the school pressures, right, for the budget they have there. I think one of the challenges there is that is an unregulated budget. When the monies go over there, it's gone. No one's watching it. And sitting on the subcommittee for finance and watching these meetings, I have I have some growing concerns. When there's some suggestions moving from $1 million cut, and then you're asking for backup on what's in there, and there's no backup. They're just saying, we're gonna cut 6, we'll put 4 back in. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of planning over there, and it's concerning, because we're appropriating lots of money, the lion's share of the budget, into that group. So I think I would suggest looking at, I loved Mr. Chair, your recommendation of having some circuit breakers, of them not being able to come back and get additional funding, but also oversight. There's a lot of money moving over there. It just doesn't have oversight. I think that should be under consideration. I think about it all the time when I think these budgets, so I don't know if it's not a criticism, it's just more of a suggestion of watching them, Nick.
Okay.
And then also, I think, I say this respectfully, you're a strong town administrator, you're holding on the budgets. I'd love to see you assert more in that, and to help manage that process a little bit more too. I think that would be helpful. And I think you've got a team of folks here that would help do some research with you to get there as well. I think it would be helpful for them. I think watching those meetings, and I watched the last one that was last week again today, and I think it would be helpful.
Okay, I appreciate the feedback.
Jay?
I'd like to follow up on what Steve just said. I think he has some great ideas. I know that other towns, I guess what I'm thinking of is somewhere on the town website. I know this isn't easy to do, but it's certainly possible to do. On the town website, you can drill as deep down as you want into a budget. Not only the line items we see, but more line items. I know that the school budget has, 100 different line items. I remember we got that big book 2 years ago. It seems
476.
difficult. 476, great. It seems difficult, but certainly not impossible to put on the town website. Here's, all 476 line items. Here's what they were in FY24. Here's what we spent in FY24, FY25, blah, blah, blah. And I think that would go a long way to what people in this town are asking for. And I don't think anything's being done inappropriately, but yeah, there's, we can't see it, and it's...
The 476 line items is on the website.
Okay,
It's in the
I appreciate it.
budget folder for the schools.
It's on
It's an 80-page presentation.
as a PDF?
It is a PDF.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're having problems with their system, and they cannot access their Excel files, any Excel file.
I just want something that's idiot-proof, that even someone like I could go on there and figure out, oh, okay, here's how, oh, yes, this budget did jump up in FY24, and that's why they were,
But that's highlighted, you can see that in a PDF.
okay, I stand corrected.
And it has notes in the column as well, yep.
Red boxes around big adjustments, and then there's notes in the last column.
And I can send
Good to hear.
Tommy the link if you want to circulate that as well.
Yeah, Nick, that would be good. And
Sure.
you could recirculate everybody. I would appreciate
Thank you,
that.
Lori.
All right, just two more, one on a no override scenario and then what the process will look like. So under a no override scenario, my recommendation would be to use, I think to Allison's point, to use the free cash on the budget. So to mitigate the immediate detrimental impact. So here's what that looks like in my outline. $1 million for Milton retirement. That number is because that's the additional contribution the town is making into the retirement system above full funding. So I think you can use free cash for that because it's not necessarily a permanent expense. We have new OPEB policy where we're supposed to contribute $2.5 million a year, increasing 2.5% each year to our long-term liabilities, either OPEB or Milton retirement. So that contribution is included in the no override budget, but funded by free cash because that's a payment again on a future liability. While it's a recurring expense, it's a future liability that the town could, in theory, also neglect to keep because it doesn't pay for positions or anything, and there's no legal mandate to fund OPEB, which is, that's post-employment retirement benefits, primarily retiree health insurance. Right now, we're paying that on a year-to-year basis rather than like a retirement system having it set up to pay those expenses through a self-funded system. $250,000 for the reserve fund, and then an extra $400,000 into the budget. And then other items that free cash would be used for, we've already talked about. I have $1 million for town and school capital. That actually is a little bit less. It's $878,500. I just didn't clean up that slide. Money for the opioid settlement purposes, that doesn't change. Stabilization fund to maintain at the current percentage. The reason it's less than in the regular budget moving forward is because our expenses would go down. So we don't need as much in stabilization. If that free cash was used in the manner to reduce to add revenue essentially to the budget, where does that leave us? It leaves us about $6 million, a little rough, give or take, to make up still. And that could be made up by dialing back both town and school departments to 1.5% year-over-year increase. That's a $5.3 million reduction on the school side from their $6.4 million request, and it's about $1 million reduction on the town departmental side. So that's when folks have talked about cuts due to a failed override, it's because we need to go back essentially to a 1.5% year-over-year increase. Just in terms of other considerations, we've talked a bit about health insurance. So if there are significant cuts, there likely will be fewer employees. What that impact would mean to health insurance would have to be evaluated. The premiums likely would not be obviously saved in any way. Our claims are our claims, and then potentially increase in unemployment costs. So this is the outline of the no override budget, and as part of the warrant that goes to town meeting, there will be two budgets. There'll be a non-contingent budget that is approved, which basically means it's not contingent on anything else, i.e. the override. So that will be the no override scenario. And beside it will be additional column for contingent budget, which will be the override budget, which says if the override is successful, this is the recommended amount. So a little bit trickier, and I'll just dive right into that process. So the select board, while they haven't voted on a ballot question, the board has voted to agree to put a ballot question on the April 29th annual town election. The question will identify the amount and the purpose of an override. It's a majority vote of all voters at that town election. And just to kind of understand the two sequences and the two steps. So the ballot question vote authorizes the town to increase its tax levy. It allows for a higher tax levy. Town meeting holds the purse strings in terms of actually appropriating money and spending that increase. So the first question that will go to the ballot is, do you support increasing the tax levy by X million dollars to fund town and school departments? If that's a yes, then the town meeting may vote on the higher amount. If it's a no, then town meeting will take up its non-contingent budget. So ballot question first, town meeting the following week. So it'll be a fast turnaround for everybody. And now that we know what has happened. So as I mentioned, there'll be two budgets, the non-contingent budget and the contingent budget. And lastly, I did want to flag this in terms of process, is that it would be possible for a subsequent, if the override were to be unsuccessful on the ballot, town meeting could still vote a contingent budget at a lower amount than the override that was previously put on the ballot, the same amount, or choose not to. But if it did, that would then kick the ball to the select board to say, would you call another ballot question election? And the select board could agree to say to town meeting members, hey, we'll put a ballot question on the ballot in June. They need 35 days to notify the town clerk. And, the ballot question lost by X amount of votes, we think we should reduce it, so let's move forward with an $8 million override, $7 million, whatever the number is, so just in terms of round numbers for process. But it is possible that by the ballot question happening on the annual town election, it does not foreclose another special election. So there will be ample discussion at town meeting, I'm sure, in either case in terms of what happens on April 29th, but I just wanted to flag that. So the warrant will show, presumably, a recommended column for the override amount that the select board has put on the ballot. After that town election, there will be a debrief and people figure out what to happen, will actually go forward. But I think ideally from an easy to follow process is it's a yes vote on April 29th and the contingent budget goes to town meeting and it's debated there. And that mitigates potential other options, but I just did want to make clear that there's this potential for additional vote, depending on the outcome of the ballot question and the town meeting.
Judy had a question, Nick, if
Okay.
now's a good time.
Sure.
Nick, I'm behind here.
Judy?
Hi?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Could I just ask a question about health insurance?
Yep.
Thank you. I know you're jumping forward and I'm jumping backwards here. When an employee of the town retires, so they take their health plan with them as long as they're not age eligible for Medicare, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, now when that employee reaches that age eligibility for, if I understand what you said, you require the employee to go on the alphabet soup of Medicare?
Yes.
If so, are they still allowed to participate in the town plan as well?
No, they're eligible for any of our supplemental plans, but they would be on Medicare for their primary insurance.
And so if they did a supplemental plan with you, with the town, excuse me, that would be a lower premium for that retiree?
Presumably because the town would be paying a share of that premium.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So anyway, I don't want to get too muddied on process, but I hope that was clear in terms of potential scenarios.
That was good. Liz had a question, then Brian.
I'm good.
If you were done at that point.
Yes, I have more backup if we need it, but that was really it
Can
that
I
I
have a
had.
funny question before Liz goes? Does the warrant committee's appointment end on the 30th, so we don't have to come back? Oh, well,
No,
we
30th of
extended-
June, nice try, right?
Sorry.
No.
Liz.
Okay, so I just want to understand what you're saying. So if the townspeople vote yes override, what happens if I have like 7 different scenarios.
Sure.
What happens if town meeting votes no?
Then the town has the authorization to raise taxes, but it's not utilizing that for fiscal '26. It could then do so in '27, but it's a permanent increase to the town's levy limit. So it'll increase what we may levy in any given year by that amount on the override, that ballot question.
Okay. And then,
Can I ask
okay,
clarify
You
that?
cede the floor, Liz?
yeah, but come back to it. Okay, go ahead.
So I've heard a lot of people say town meeting votes for an override or not. Town meeting doesn't vote for or against an override, correct?
Correct.
So when Liz said if town meeting votes no, it's just if town meeting decided to reduce every budget.
Yes, that's a good clarification. If town meeting doesn't authorize spending to the full amount of the override, then that would just go untaxed in that year, in theory.
Thanks, Judy. That's helpful.
I'm always happy to interrupt.
I appreciate it. So if so that's if the town votes at the election, yes, we want the override, and then town meeting decides not to fully utilize that. Or you could have the situation where the town votes yes, and then the town meeting decides to fully utilize that.
Right.
If you have a situation where the town votes no, and town meeting decides, Jay can help me out, that they want to go through with the contingent budget, then it would pop back to the select board to
Correct.
then determine what to do next.
Correct.
And then if everybody votes not to have that higher budget, then that is what it is.
Correct.
If the town meeting asks for that increased budget and it goes back to the select board, we would have a special election, which would then cost what?
The one for the MBTA communities, it was like 55,000, and that was at a real. There was a lot of vote by mail in that election, so that was a big driver of the cost. But I would use that ballpark to estimate the cost. 50 to 60,000,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Hey, Brian?
Yeah, can I get the PowerPoint?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Sec. And can you click back one screen? So the first 4 items, I probably hate this question, but like, if you could do that without affecting the town, why wouldn't we just do that anyways? Because it's like $3 million, right?
Because, well, that would be $3 million in the fiscal '27 budget that has no recurring source of funding. So it's not one-time expenses. It's recurring sources of, it's recurring expenses that we, in my recommendation, we would choose to fund with free cash in fiscal '26 only. But in '27, we should expect $1 million, potentially $1 million for retirement, 1.56 million at least for OPEB as well, in order to maintain the town's policies. Reserve fund is there annually, and that operating budget support is just going into recurring expenses.
Right, okay, but you could do it, but it would skip
be.
a year.
It-
And the problem is that in '27, right, you would have to spend that money.
Correct,
Or you think,
correct.
possibly spend it.
The town's policy says that $2.5 million would go to its future long-term liabilities, rather. So that's a recurring known expense. In this scenario, I'm saying, hey, for '26 alone, fund it with free cash. The town has no choice but to pay for the $1 million for Milton retirement, because that was included in the retirement board's funding schedule, and that becomes a binding obligation on the town at that point. The OPEB payment is one that is not, it's a binding obligation in the sense that it's in the select board's policies to make it. But it's not, there's no law that
But you're
requires
fully
it.
funded in the retirement plan. You actually
Correct.
don't have to pay that.
You do if it's in the retirement board's funding schedule, even though it's over and above the retirement board's, to get to full funding. It's law that what the retirement board sets as its funding schedule, that city or town is obligated to pay.
Even if you're fully funded?
Correct. That's the Mass General Law protection for the retirement boards. And this was a subject of conversation which Jay helpfully participated in last year, because the initial funding schedules from the retirement board, that even though it was reaching full funding, were to make significantly more payments than $1 million above what was needed.
But if you can pull it, then you don't have to pay it. I'm confused.
In this case, we're making it, but with free cash as the funding source in fiscal '26. So we're making that payment in fiscal '26, but we're just using free cash to do so, rather than having it come out of the operating budget as usual.
Ron, do you have?
Do any towns any towns ever considered having multiple override levels in the same ballot? Let's say you propose 6 million, and you let the voters decide if they're comfortable with that, and you also propose 8 million.
Yes, it's a possible, they have tiered and pyramid type overrides, as that is a possible option. And it's something that has been discussed a bit. I think there's pros and cons to both, to doing it with a single number, or, structuring with potential double numbers. And the way it works is it would have to be the full amount. So it could be $9.5 million or an $11.5 million. It couldn't be $9.5 million and then a question like, do you want to add an additional million on top of that? It has to be the full amount, and then the highest amount that is approved is what it goes forward.
Jay?
I don't want to get too much into the weeds and details of this budget, but I do want to say that under the no override scenario, which would be panic, riot in the streets scenario, putting $300,000 into the stabilization, or not stabilization, the stabilization fund, that's 4 employees who are laid off because we're putting $300,000 in the stabilization fund. I know it's a hard choice, but eventually your proposal is going to come around this table and we're going to vote on it. And I would say in the no override scenario, 0 in the stabilization fund, just because that's 4 people who are losing their jobs. So again, probably not the night to discuss that.
No, it would be, if it's recommended by the select board and when I present it to them, I agree. I don't want to be that guy who's, just counting pennies. But I think the unfortunate situation that we're in is our costs are still going up. We still need a reserve. Federal funding is more in doubt than it's ever been. And the economy is not in a bad position. So we should continue to build up our reserves, or at least maintain them at a bare minimum, which this proposes to do, so that if the economy were to truly crash, or if federal funding were to truly dry up, the town still has that safety valve for, a nightmare scenario. I think a no override and the impacts is really troubling in terms of the impact on people and across town and schools. So I hear that, and it's.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
No.
Thank you
It was something we struggled with as well, because I think we had to at least have the conversation about maintaining, since, our other big picture economic outlook is unchanged.
Thank you.
There's questions on comment, and then so my company just went through a 9% RIF last week, so 1,350 people, right? Some 19 years. They're not town employees, so they don't have pensions, right? Different situation, but so my heart goes out to the folks. But I also think the town, these departments should be looking at overlaid resources or jobs where they might be able to utilize other folks to cover stuff. So there could be redundancies in there that could offset those costs. Every business looks at OpEx. This is a business at the end of the day. I mean, you're calling out line items here. So I think it would behoove the groups to have that conversation. I'm certainly going to ask the school committee when we sit down with them, hey, what are you looking at? Are there positions that can be utilized to do more than one gig? I think it's fair.
It always at the very least, it enables people to have these conversations and think about things a little differently.
It's a hard conversation.
Sure.
Without a doubt.
Liz?
Now, I was going to ask you about that federal funding question, so I'm glad you brought that up. So, maybe you don't know off the top of your head, but what sort of money is Milton getting from federal funding, either directly from the federal government or via the state? How much of our budget is that?
The schools are certainly more of a recipient than town departments are in any way. Our biggest infusion of federal funding that town departments used was the ARPA federal monies, and that has been exhausted at this point. The Milton Coalition is funded through a Drug-Free Communities federal grant, so that has federal money behind it. I know that there's an outreach position at the Milton Police Department, which I believe comes through a state grant, but it might be federal money, and the chief can confirm that. The fire department usually applies for, fire assistance to firefighter grants through the federal government. We have a grant for upgrading one of the sewer pump stations on Granite Ave to get it out of the floodplain. So it's more grant kind of discrete projects on the town side. The federal money that flows through the state government that then helps the state set its budget, that helps the state not have to take away from local aid in other places. That's a lot, and I couldn't speak to particulars around that. And the schools can speak more directly about how their federal grants work and the latest on that.
Are these grants that you're talking about, like the fire department, et cetera, is that more budget enhancing or budget relieving?
No, I would agree. It's more, in that case, that the assistance to firefighters it's equipment, so it's avoiding costs for us, but it's not necessarily an annual cost that we would have every year. And then the other projects are more kind of discrete capital investments, which again aren't recurring operating costs, but help us avoid costs and avoid putting costs on Milton taxpayers.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about like sort of different things that could happen. Not like an emergency, but given that we have a new administration, different things that might not be like status quo that we've seen in the past. So, okay, thank you.
All right. So, I think members have the town budgets. I believe everything has been uploaded to that folder. I know a lot of folks have met with department heads. I talked to Marina Fernandez today. I don't believe she's had an opportunity to meet with anybody because she was new to the role, and I think I'd asked you folks to kind of hold off, but she's available.
Okay.
And that was the big one that I was aware of, but obviously if there are meetings that you need to have with department heads and we can facilitate, let us know, but I'm sure they'll be happy to chat about their budget with everybody. The shared items in that kind of bigger picture category, you can reach out to myself, Amy Dexter, or the treasurer, Joanna McCarthy, depending on what they are, and we can point you in the right direction for follow-up additional information. We know the next 4 weeks are a busy time. We apologize for the crunch, but we will make ourselves available to make it as painful or painless as possible, I guess, depending on the subject. But we're here to help if we can. And hopefully we can keep that warrant article workload for the annual limited.
Nick, can I just ask some just questions?
Sure.
You addressed before, like what do you see coming in? There's nothing from the CPA or the.
Oh, sorry, I treated that as like a recurring budget
Okay.
article. So they have their annual appropriation and then their annual project requests. So that is on the list as part of.
Okay.
They're still, I guess, still new to us in a way, but they've made it to my recurring list.
They are still new. And Conservation Commission, nothing you can.
Not,
I know it's-
my knowledge this year, I know they are seeking potential funding in the future, but usually through CPA directly.
Okay. Okay, and I guess, Nick, to that vein, and I know I threw in an email, I guess I'm going to be working with the town departments and CCing you.
Sure.
Just, I'd like to get started. We're going to talk about scheduling, but I'd like to get the town stuff on the side, and figure we're probably going to have big meetings with the school department, or the school committee and the planning board, so.
Yep. Sounds good. And so school committee is meeting Wednesday night to finalize their budget. They have their budget public hearing, I think, is posted as such. Select board's meeting is March 11th, where we should finalize the warrant articles and an override question. And then just in terms of if this committee has big picture feedback or recommendation for the warrant committee, the warrant committee, for the select board, I'm sure they would be interested to hear that. I know that doesn't give you folks a lot of time, just in terms of kind of more of the big picture elements. But, and then we're always available for questions on an as-needed basis. So between now and May, you're our priority, so whatever we can do.
So Nick, Lori, 1 second. So everything really we need, and I've looked at the folder, is in that folder as we speak.
Yeah,
General and the main, I just want to kind of for the meeting members where to go.
Yep.
When they need to take a peek.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll confirm tomorrow. If anything looks like it's not there, let us know. But I believe everything was moved into that folder over the past few months.
Okay.
And there's a
Seems pretty substantial.
and there's a workbook that just kind of puts everything together as well.
Okay, Nick, thank you. Lori?
Do we need for the no override scenario to have budgets that delineate those cuts beforehand, or do we do that?
Yes, we are finalizing those. I know the school committee is working to have those, I believe, finalized by the school committee on Wednesday, and then we would do so likewise next week.
Nick, what GL system does the town use, and what, if any, BI tools does the town have?
We use, it's called SoftWrite. It's from Cirrus, I think is the
SoftWrite?
SoftWrite, yeah. It's a legacy municipal GL system, to put it kindly.
Yeah.
GL?
Very
Is that what you're saying?
General Ledger, sorry.
System.
Very gentlemanly of you.
And by that, am I to assume there are basically no BI tools or analytics that?
No.
He is the AI.
The OG.
Amy, that's Amy, not me. No, that's where we are. We have looked at upgrading payroll and going more to a cloud-based system for that alone, but with the budget where it is, our options are limited. So,
Nick,
on the list.
yeah, I'm sure we're gonna have more questions for you.
Sure.
As this goes on, maybe have you back a time or
course.
two, just with the crunch, but I appreciate it. Anybody have anything last minute for Nick? Probably got him?
Thanks for your partnership.
No,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you.
and appreciate your work. Sorry for a busy February and March.
Oh.
So hope you'll all be interested in doing it again next year.
That's the gig.
That's right. Okay, well, thank you. I'll be in touch, and then if there's anything else we could do, let us know.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, great. Thank
night.
you very much.
Talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you.
Does town have a grant writer?
No, they do.
What's the question?
No, I
Does
don't
the
think
town
so.
have a
No, I have asked that question many times. They do
grant
not.
writer?
Yeah, I think they just, like the planning board, like they'll have the planner write one, or they'll have somebody in the schools write one.
There are just some people in departments that kind of do it and know how, but there isn't
Yeah.
a person in any department and there's not a single person for the town.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like internal discussion and who wants to bite the bullet, put it together, I've heard of it, when I watch the different meetings, I hear various committees like talk about grants and writing and, things that they're looking for. So I know there are many people, given our financial sitch, who are always looking to boost our funding. But I don't have any specifics.
Could be a role that more than pays for itself.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. So I guess when we're looking at this now, a lot of you have spoken to some various committees. We're really in a crunch. I think the expectation in the summer was maybe that the various subcommittees kind of present to the committee, then we'll have the person in, kind of so everybody's well armed to discuss the issues in the budget with that particular department. I don't know, that may be looking like it's changing a little bit. I think we have about a month to jam this in. So I was thinking, based upon what Nick said and just our knowledge of the situation, the planning board is going to be probably a whole evening with them, potentially. Certainly the schools, I expect a whole evening with them. Maybe a couple with the school department. Then we have, the majors we have to bring in, we should, DPW, fire, police, Board of Health, Parks, maybe the Council on Aging. I think the CPA should come in. So those are just kind of some of the major ones, I think, that we should be talking to, and we're gonna have to stack them. So we're gonna have multiple people speaking on one night and then having a discussion about it. This is just really gonna be tight. This is gonna be really unlike the past couple of years for the third year members. We've already been talking usually general budget now, and having the people in, but just a couple of thoughts. Lori, Ron, whoever.
So with the no override option, I think I wonder when they'll set their budgets based on that no override option, because I think we'd want to talk to them after they figure out
Of
what the
course.
impacts are.
Yeah, and that's going to be part of that conversation. If we get it, if we don't, what's your plan?
How many layoffs? How can you reduce
Yeah.
services?
Like
What's the impact on
all of these things, we're going to have to comment on it, just so, in that being said, school committee, subcommittee members, I'm going to ask you guys are going to have to write the school comment this year.
What'd you say?
The school committee, subcommittee members, I'm going to ask that you guys help draft the comment as a team. It's going to be a lot of information. I think the five of you are probably best suited to tackle that. Of course, with input from all of us, in the discussion from the committee, but I think that's going to be quite the undertaking. I think the five of you, and I can talk to you about it also, and you can discuss with me, like, structure of it, you want to break it up, but I've mentioned it to a couple of subcommittee members in passing. I think that would be the best thing. I think you're the best well-heeled to tackle those numbers. That's what everybody wants to know about, right? That's the driving force behind this override. Essentially, so that's what people are going to want to know about.
My kids are very interested.
Yeah, right?
They're speculating
Yeah,
how many
mine are
people
too.
get laid off.
Yeah.
And they're talking about it nonstop, and it's concerning, so.
It's true.
So that's gonna be the big one, and then we'll just figure out. I know we frequently have Nick and Amy's help on some of them, right, Nick and Amy? But just drafting, because remember if you've not been a part of the drafting process, 37 outside articles that no one really, usually part of the consent agenda, but we need to comment on them and explain some basic information, convey some basic information to town meeting on why we're asking them to approve this. So,
Judy has her hand up.
Judy.
Tom,
Yep.
you were mentioning about having department heads come in.
Sure.
Did 2 departments. They've already been done. I had wonderful meetings with them, and neither one of them would, they feel as though I would be able to present all the information on their behalf, and we're not really pumped up to come in and talk to us. I don't know what you want to do, I just...
Well, I mean, Judy, I can talk to you too, and I have the list of assignments. I mean, I think we need to speak to the major players in town on the budget.
Okay.
I know that there are a lot, like cemetery, for example. Usually we have libraries in, and maybe we can get them in just to share with us what their future asks may be, or what they have going on. But I'm also very cognizant of our time in getting these done. I have meetings set up Mondays and Wednesdays until April. I've also discussed expanding that to Thursdays.
You said what?
I have meetings for Mondays and Wednesdays from now until the warrant closes. I'm thinking that they might be expanded to Thursdays also. So we just need a quorum in the room. Just make sure. I know that might be a lot, but I think we might have to expanding. I'll know more between now and Monday. We're gonna have a meeting on Monday and Wednesday next week. I'll know more now after I send the emails out to the department heads who can come in. I know with Amon has been doing a lot of work with the Historical Commission. For those who weren't here earlier, I think they're bringing their article back, so we're gonna have to have them in. They're meeting with MPIC, so I assume that's gonna be on our horizon too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different boards in a month. So that's really it, and then it's obviously getting down to the budget and then drafting the comments. Anybody, Liz?
Yes, so, but minus, like, at least a week for comments and submitting them.
Yeah, I've they'll be due on that first Friday in April, probably for the printer. So I know there are other warrant committee chairs who have done a lot of the writing on these. I'll be working with Nick and Amy on some of the more consent agenda-based ones, but in terms of the other one, we might have to have more people writing this time. And the comments that were done, like I said last time, we got a lot of awesome feedback about our committee and the work we do, based upon the members and people from the public reading the comments that they were impressed. So I'm sure we can replicate that this year. This meeting. Or
So, the CPA group that comes in,
Yep.
is there, that is something that they make a determination of, they know how much money they collect, they make the determination of how they're gonna spend it. And it's great to hear what they have to say, but if in the interest of time, they don't have a budget that we're gonna, could affect, so I don't know if that's one that.
yeah, like Council on Aging is another. Board of Health is another. Right? And what I'm going to do is I'll send everyone an email this week, if not tonight. If there's a board or committee that you really want to hear from, just send me an email.
I think the Board of Health was so impressive to hear from last year.
Oh, they certainly were.
I mean, so for every people that weren't here, I mean, the things that they do that I had no idea that they did.
Yeah. But I'd say just,
But-
I'll just kind of send something out and there's something, but I'm going to stick to probably the big ones. Knowing that we're going to be we're going to have another meeting, probably full planning board, warrant committee meeting. And then I don't know how many times we're going to meet with the schools. Ron?
I assume these boards will have to report to Nick what their plans are to come into compliance with those cuts. I would think maybe if he can share that plan with us, we can decide which ones do we really think we need to talk to. Because if their departments are not impacted, then I would deprioritize them against the ones that are getting cuts. So,
Yeah.
if we're tight on time, I
I
would
mean,
just.
that's one way to do it. We can just do it on the papers.
You raise a good point. Does everyone on the warrant committee, and I don't know if I do, does everyone on the warrant committee know how to get to the shared drive where all the budgets are?
I think it's sent to-
It would take me several minutes to find it, but,
Oh, Tom sent an email with the link.
Sent an email
okay,
with the link to-
okay, maybe I'm
Direct link.
overly worried,
You
but
want to check
The
your
OneDrive,
email,
yeah.
check?
Yeah.
You just recirculate.
if it comes from Tom, just delete.
It was like 2 or 3 days ago
Yeah.
that you sent.
Oh, that recent, okay, well, great,
Recirculated it, but
great.
Yeah, it was previously sent, but like that's why we sent some other stuff from like Wayback Machine, like the override stuff.
It's good to have.
I think that Ron had a good idea about prioritizing those departments, or at least like combining, so maybe we want to hear from those committees that aren't as directly financially impacted, but maybe shove a bunch of them in one and say, you know,
Yeah, I mean, if we get this whole list, I'd be shocked.
let's just shove them together.
So I have very low expectations anyway. So I'm going to do my best to.
So if the
the
select
best
board
piece.
is voting on the 11th, maybe for the number, how long do you think it will take the various departments to then? Because to your point, Ron, I mean, if they know override situation, they should be able to do that.
Oh,
That's
it's
what-
easy.
Working on it, he said.
He said Wednesday, right? I think he said Wednesday.
Yeah,
Supposed to submit their.
It's next Wednesday.
next Wednesday, because
So-
the
so then
11th
that's-
is what, Monday or something?
That brings us to the week of the, 17th, 16th? And that's 2 weeks. So we really don't have a lot of time.
It's a week before we have to give you the
17th
comments
is
to edit them.
Monday, right?
Yeah. So,
That's fine, I'm just trying to get a.
No, I appreciate- no, I mean,
Full
you're-
schedule in my mind.
no, you're right.
Exactly.
And, I was thinking about this a lot over the weekend and today, and it's going to be difficult. We're going to have to give schools plenty of time. Planning board's going to demand some time. Historical, we got to give them some time. So,
Are there any other articles that you know that might just pop on up? Because
the historical commission would probably be the most surprising thing.
because if the lighting bylaw were to come back again, I don't know that we need to really delve deep into it unless it's substantially different.
Well, see if they get the public comment done.
And the same with the, I understand what you're saying about the planning.
Trespass?
No, I understand what you're saying about the planning board coming back, but if their changes are largely what we talked about beforehand, I don't know how much we really can get deep into all of those since. If I'm
I mean, is it-
Can we explain
if-
that?
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
If they, would they push out the meeting if there wasn't enough time? I mean, it must be not enough time for other people too.
They can't.
Like, if they have to go back, they can't?
That's the only one that's statutory, is it has to be that Monday.
Is it?
Yeah, that's the only one that has to be when it is.
Mm.
Anything else can be sort of, but that one
Yeah,
it's just-
has
that's
to be
why-
the first Monday in May.
That's why our special fall was in the spring.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
It's supposed to be in November,
yeah.
that's the only one that really
Yeah.
has to be
Maybe a
then.
tight squeeze.
but that one, as Liz said, is that we have to do it then.
Yep.
So this is, I guess, up to
Good
me.
idea,
We'll,
though.
with your advice, we'll figure this out, our upcoming schedule. But I'm going to be reaching out to obviously Larry Loffer, Meredith Hall, and Lizzie Carroll at schools, and locking them down for when they're going to come into the warrant committee. Those are the three big ones. I mean, I don't say historic, but I mean, if there's a brand new article and it's gonna be a bylaw about colors of houses and what kind of lights you can use and all that kind of stuff, we're gonna have to talk about it, so. Jay?
Can I ask about something different than
Sure.
scheduling?
Yeah.
So Nick says, so the select board is going to decide on a number a week from tomorrow. And one of the last things Nick said, and then he left the room, he said, if the warrant committee has big picture feedback for the select board, they would like to hear that. So what do you think, Mr. Chair? Can we provide such feedback
As a committee, we can.
tonight?
It's not on the agenda, Jay, if you're talking about, what are you talking about doing?
It was an open-ended question, but yeah, providing feedback would be something like, it might be like, we think the select board should do level service override. We think they should do more than level service override. That's the sort of I mean, I don't think we can get in the nitty-gritty and recommend a specific number between now and next Tuesday, but maybe we could recommend that. And if it's not on the agenda, I don't know if we could meet on Thursday.
Yeah, I was, I was gonna plan on speaking to the select board and seeing how maybe they would wanna do that.
Not during their meeting, but speaking to them offline, okay? Okay,
If they would like a public comment in a public forum,
okay,
they'd like us to draft something and send it to them, something like that.
okay. You think that's something we could do before?
Yeah, I discussed it with Nick about comments.
Okay,
to the select
great.
board.
Can I share a PowerPoint?
Not tonight, Jay.
Okay, okay. Not tonight, but it's related to the size of the override, so.
I have a lot of questions about your PowerPoint.
Okay,
This is
that's
the
fine.
one that I'd like to, and there's some things I think we should be adding.
Okay, cool.
Speaking of PowerPoints, will Nick send around that updated PowerPoint?
Yeah, is that up online?
No, he'll send it.
He'll send it, okay. No, it's not, so.
Did he say he was gonna send it?
And I'm sure he will.
He will.
Okay, thank you.
Have him posted it in the OneDrive, if he can. That'd be helpful, right?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Liz. I will have him do that if he doesn't.
I'm sure he will, but.
Andrew, yeah.
I'm still surprised that the town doesn't have a grant writer. And the reason I bring that up is with the override in mind, there are very few ways that we can control increasing revenues, right? And there are limits to how many grants you can extract from the state or federal government, right? But if some of those or private grants are, if we're missing out on opportunities to fund town initiatives, whether it is upgrading the GL system, that's another area that I have real concerns about. If you can't measure something or drill down into it, how can we effectively make sure that, one, we're spending things as judiciously as necessary, two, that we're being as transparent as we should be, and three, really sort of set a plan for like long-term planning. Like if we're running off of an archaic system that really has limits into how we're digging into the financials or granularity that we may need in order to do that. I'd love to see the town have a plan for investing in it, or at least saving to invest in it, because any enterprise resource or enterprise software project it's a multi-year thing. So if we keep saying we don't have the money to invest in it now, and we kick the can down 3 years down the road or 5 years down the road, that means that 3 or 5 year project clock starts 5 years down the road, and so we're looking at 10 years out. And I think the sounder thing is to figure out how to plan for it so that it happens sooner rather than later. And that would be sort of one of the things that I would push to the select board as a recommendation.
I think it was on the plan that he wanted to purchase the system, but obviously.
Would that be on like the needs-based requests? Was that, okay?
I mean, it's hard, right? But
Oh, yeah.
without the tools to sort of set us on the right tools, the less you invest on tools and less you spend on things that may identify redundancies or create new workflows that reduces or frees up staff time to do other things. You're sort of doomed to keep throwing manpower at it. And with regards to healthcare, one of the things it's a really generous plan, just based on the numbers. And one of the things that they did not share is the actual premium amounts that families are paying and looking at it. And we just need to make sure that they are commensurate to other towns, and also look at it from a perspective of what does it look like for ordinary families that are paying in for-profit or their jobs. And if there's some big difference, I mean, $400 deductible is pretty low by today's standards. And a lot of companies are moving towards higher deductible plans. And so I just want to make sure they're looking at things that, should they go to a higher deductible plan and fund an HRA, where their reimbursement account, or look at other options and just make sure that employees are paying a reasonably fair share of the burden that most other families in town are paying. So those are sort of key areas that I'd love to see.
One of the concerns with the health insurance is that it is more generous, but their compensation, their salary is less generous than the private sector.
Yep, but also.
But I agree.
Yeah.
I think we should certainly look at it, but.
So when plans are going up like 10, 15%, and we're only charging 3% increases, then
And healthcare holidays.
that's not sustainable.
What do you mean 3% increases?
Meaning premium increases over fiscal year 18-19? Is that what I saw in the PowerPoint?
Oh, in the past, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, those went up with the employees pay 24% of the cost.
No,
Period.
exactly,
So-
but the increases in premiums. So if you look at what's happening in the market, it went from like this and hockey sticked.
Well, but the claims we paid didn't until this year. Sorry.
But meaning the premiums that we're asking employees to pay, like they should rise at a reasonable rate. 3% is that's
Well, but again,
COLA, right?
the claims are going up 3%.
Is that the claims?
Well, what I'm saying is, since we're self-insured, the claims are paying out and the premiums we're bringing in should just about equal. And our claims are pretty flat for a while. Except for the COVID year, they were flat for like 6 or 7 years. So, yeah, that's why the premiums were flat. But not so much this year.
Liz.
So that reminds me, and what Steve was saying and Lori was saying reminds me, and Allison reminds me too. So we had discussed at the outset of this whole year of meeting, kind of looking back at some of the assumptions underlying the budget. So each budget increases a little bit every year, but kind of saying, well, that's all sort of conditioned on the fact that at some point back in the day, people made good decisions and we're just adding. So not before this upcoming town meeting, but possibly thereafter, it might make sense to have whatever departments come in and say, okay, or to have Nick come in. That was something we had discussed. Can we look back historically on how we got here? So I agree with Steve. It's a business, right? So if you had a business, you would go back and look and say, are there things that we could be doing more efficiently? Like compare it to, I mean, I understand what you're saying, they get paid less compensation, but compare to private companies and say, is this what we should be doing for our health insurance? Not just because we've always done it, but is this what we should be doing? Compare to other towns. But Steve was saying, look at the positions and see if there are possible places where we could have overlap for people's job duties to kind of combine roles. So I think that's really smart, and maybe after this annual town meeting, I don't know, instead of like whatever we do after that, we can kind of think about, can we bring some of these departments in or bring Nick in and kind of look at that underlying assumptions on the budget.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
It wasn't my idea, I'm just bringing it back up again.
No, yeah, it's a good
It was Lori's
idea.
idea originally. I'm
No,
gonna give you credit.
because I had brought it up
It was your
that
idea.
we're, I mean, yes, we're increasing by a percentage point, but
Yeah,
is that the right thing to look at?
Yeah, and the
well, I think that was a good idea you had.
and the line by line analysis.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what you'll see here departments, and we heard from the school department at their most recent meeting, they just add, they do exactly that. They don't look at the lines. They don't look at the individual things. They just do what they historically have done. And they said this in the meeting, and they just,
They just add
yeah, they
just a
just kind
couple
of
of
add
percentage
the
points.
percentage. This is what we think. So I think, it would be great because, you go through and,
And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I'm just saying that there are places that people could think creatively to think, are there grants that we're not
Yeah.
taking advantage of? Are there positions that, could overlap and we could, kind of combine positions? Are there things that we could do comparing to other towns and thinking creatively? We don't have to do everything the way that we do it year over year just because that's how it was done, so.
yeah, and I think, Liz, I appreciate you bringing it up, and I know with at least what Nick was talking about, having something like that in place, like the small percentage, what goes up, right? What do we add to, and what the historical and the comparisons, I think would be very helpful, especially if the override passes and we have to lock in, how they can control the costs and cut.
I'm like thinking about how we would lock in and how that
Well,
would
I know,
actually
right?
happen.
How that
when
actually works.
Salaries go
It's a
up
cool idea.
3%.
Yeah. Jay, then Ron?
Okay, just following up directly on that, the town has done that in the relatively recent past. In 5, 6, 7 years ago, we created the Consolidated Facilities Department. Previously, we had a town facilities department and a school facilities department. And I'm making this up. It might have been from the town government study committee that suggested the consolidated facilities. Somebody suggested a consolidated facility department, and that was a good idea. And I presume it's saving us money. I don't know if we have put our fingers on it. So that's something that happened in the past. Yay us. And going forward, I'm always happy for the warrant committee to take up things where we can be useful. Is that the warrant committee? Should there be a eternal town government study committee that is constantly looking at things like this? What else was I going to say? I don't know what else I was going to say. Okay, that's all.
Jay, thank you.
Like one really inane example is warrants, right? We print warrants. I would happily, if given the option, opt out for receiving a printed warrant. I know we may have, it would, by bylaw, we may have to,
Yeah.
but
Can I respond? Or do you want to?
Oh, yeah, you finished?
yeah, no, paper. Like,
Yeah, 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, town meeting, so previously, the warrant was mailed to every single person in town. 3 or 4 years ago, the town meeting voted, don't do that, only send it to town meeting members and have maybe 100 others. And if you look at the budget for printing in the town clerk's office, it didn't change. Or maybe it went from 6,000 to 5,000. And on the General Government Committee, I was like, why didn't this go down? And I don't remember the answer, but maybe now we're far enough ahead that You and I are on the general government committee, which oversees the town clerk.
Yeah.
Maybe we can ask,
No, I mean, like,
when you printed 10,000 of them, it cost this much, and now you're printing 1,000 of them, and it costs almost the same. What's going on?
or maybe we change the bylaws, or I'm not saying that we do, but it's,
I guess what I'm saying is we cut it by 90% and the cost didn't go down.
I would-
So cutting it by the other
Postage gone up.
10%.
How much has postage gone up?
and I would opt out of virtually most paper that I receive today. I'd rather not receive paper. It's just one more thing for me to recycle. And like, there's some things that I want to get, but I don't need a paper excise bill mailed to me. And so somebody has to stuff that envelope, somebody has to print it, somebody has to receive the check. And why we're charging 50 cents for Unibank to receive an electronic payment, which saves staff time, is like insane to me. Like, we should be encouraging people to pay electronically. And so I think when you look at things like that in totality, I mean, there's opportunity to save significant amounts and sort of rethink how we do business.
Ron, you're gonna say how much you like coming up to town hall at the end of the month and paying your bill in person at the treasurer, right?
Well, I do enjoy the paper because I do recycling, but it sounds like the Department of Government Efficiency is being requested.
Yeah.
I'm going to take no position on that. I think these are all good ideas. I think we'd probably want to work very closely with Nick, because it sounds like a lot of these would be administrative opportunities, and I don't know if we would want to drive that, because I worry that we will use up a lot of town employee time chasing things that maybe teams have already looked at. I would lean on Nick to say, hey, how can we help you run this town more efficiently? That's his job, to manage all these things, not us. I think we can oversee it. So I just worry that if we go off and take a charter to say we're gonna go sit with each team and ask them questions that, in theory, I think they should report to Nick, because Nick's their boss. So I would say if Nick can propose a plan, then we can help him. But I just worry that, I mean, we all have lives outside of this, we all have jobs.
No, I mean, we don't want to tackle all of it, but also want to make sure that,
But I think your ideas are good, and I think even just sending Nick the ideas of like, have you looked at this or that?
Yeah.
You know, what-
And we can also comment on them, you know? We can
Yeah.
say like, you know, whatever, there's no override, well, tough financial times, but these are some ideas the Warrant Committee had, you know, that could be implemented by town government. And we put them out there, and working with Nick, I'm sure he'll make most of the list.
Some of these may take years, like, of course.
yeah, no, but I just want to make sure they have a plan to do this, right? Not that they should swallow the whole elephant at once, but I just don't get the sense that they're doing that, and it just seems iterative on what we did last year, right? There's very few times where I see innovations in the town that is like mind-blowing, that's like great. Like,
What's left on the agenda?
Well, that's really it. I mean, I think really what I do is when we leave here, I will reach out to Nick and to Lizzie and Meredith on schools and planning board and try to set something up with them as soon as possible, and try to work with them to see how much time we're going to need. Schools will have it approved. They've been working on it since the summer. They'll know what to talk about, and I think we're pretty well versed in what's going on there too. So.
And if anybody has any specific questions about the schools beforehand, besides the Excel spreadsheet. But if there's anything specific, let me know.
Yeah, Lori and members of the school subcommittee, they have a ton of information. That's where I go to get information, so they may already have it, so it could save you a trip. Again, I know I don't mean to keep coming back to the schools, but that's just the biggest piece of the budget. And does anybody have anything else they'd like to talk about? Is there anything else anybody can think of now that they're going to want to talk about in the next month? Something that's important, other than really what we've discussed? Schools planning, kind of pare down the departments coming in. Those who have spoken to departments, do you feel comfortable speaking to them? I know DPW, we can handle DPW, but is there, like general government? Would you feel comfortable kind of speaking to,
Not at the moment, no.
no, not at the moment, but like.
Yeah.
At some point in the next couple of weeks, like just speaking to the work that you've done and things that we can suggest.
I have to refresh some stuff in my mind, but.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, just because of the override discussion, they might have changed thoughts about some of the things that we discussed, but otherwise, yeah, it's fine.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to say? I know Jay has done some work for us. He just mentioned it, so I'm gonna have Jay come in next week probably and present what he has. I know some other people are working on some stuff too to present, but we ready to go next week?
Happily. Would that be Monday of next week?
Yeah, we'll figure out based upon the people coming in.
Okay.
And then obviously, if there's messaging to the select board, as Jay mentioned, I'll discuss with everyone how we're gonna do that.
I gotta admit, I didn't understand that last statement. If there's messaging to the select board,
I'm gonna figure out how they want it.
Okay.
And then we're gonna do it. So it could
Okay.
could very well be on Monday,
okay, thank you.
because they'll be meeting the following night.
Thank you.
Just kind of give them guide in terms of what they would want to hear from us
Thank you.
about that. Anything else?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.